Again, it will be like a man going on a journey, who called his servants and entrusted his wealth to them. To one he gave 5 bags of gold, to another 2 bags, and to another 1 bag, each according to his ability. Then he went on his journey. The man who had received 5 bags of gold went at once and put his money to work and gained 5 bags more. So also the one with 2 bags of gold gained 2 more. But the man who had received 1 bag went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those servants returned and settled accounts with them. The man who had received 5 bags of gold brought the other 5. "Master," he said, "you entrusted me with 5 bags of gold. See, I have gained 5 more." His master replied, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness." The man with 2 bags of gold also came. "Master," he said, "you entrusted me with 2 bags of gold. See, I have gained 2 more." His master replied, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness." Then the man who had received 1 bag of gold came. "Master," he said, "I knew that you are a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown, and gathering where you have not scattered seed. So I was afraid, and went out and hid your gold in the ground. See, here is what belongs to you." His master replied, "You wicked, lazy servant. So you knew that I harvest where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed? Well, then you should have put my money on deposit with the bankers, so that when I returned, I would have received it back with interest. So take the bag of gold from him, and give it to the one who has 10 bags. For whoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them. And throw that worthless servant outside, into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise be to you, Lord Christ.
Please be seated. I would like to talk to you today about the statistical decline of the church and what we are called to do about it. But first, we begin in today's gospel. Today's gospel occurs in the final discourse of Jesus in the Gospel of Matthew. There are 5 discourses in Matthew, sections that span oftentimes multiple chapters that are just the words of Jesus. Words back to back to back to back. The Sermon on the Mount is one of these. Chapter 5, chapter 6, chapter 7, all Jesus' teaching. Today we are in the last discourse. And the final discourse in the Gospel of Matthew is about final things. Jesus is preparing his disciples for what comes next, because he knows he's about to die. He knows he's about to leave them. And so many of these parables that we're hearing have to do with a master of some sort who goes away for a long time and is expected earlier but doesn't return until finally he does. We've heard this time and time again, including just last week and the week before. Today, Jesus is telling his disciples this parable to tell them what he's going to expect of them when he's gone. Jesus is the master who is going away, and what is he doing? But he's entrusting all of his wealth to his own servants. Now, what is Jesus' wealth? Did Jesus have 9 bags of gold? Not literally, as far as we know. But I would argue to you that he had at least 11 bags of gold. And those were the disciples. After all, what was Jesus' treasure? Jesus' treasure were the souls and spirits of the children of God that God had given to him, people who believed in him and who followed him, people who had set their hearts on God as he himself had led them to do. Jesus' followers are his riches. And as he goes away, he leaves his followers in the responsibility of various churches. Now, you've probably not heard this gospel interpreted this way, but I'd like to give you something new from time to time. Not the gospel that you've always heard. And it seems to me that this is what Jesus is speaking about on one level in today's parable. In this sense, in this interpretation, Jesus is the master, and he is the one who reaps where he hasn't sown and harvests where he hasn't scattered seed. What does that mean? That means that Jesus is not simply reaping the reward of the insiders. Jesus is going outside of his own territory and bringing people in. He's growing his kingdom. Jesus is going to places where the chief priests and scribes have scattered seed. And people have started to grow in faith and they're sort of unsure. And Jesus is the one who comes in and reaps that wealth and brings them into his kingdom. Does that make sense? Jesus is the one who's gathering where he didn't scatter seed, where others have scattered seed. Jesus goes out of his territory, finds those people, reaps the abundance of the Spirit that God has put into them, and draws them also into his kingdom where they also become part of Jesus' treasure and Jesus' own wealth. This is who Jesus is as the master. And as he's going away, he's going to die, be resurrected, and go to his Father's kingdom. And we're waiting for the second coming. And in that in-between time, Jesus takes all of the riches, the abundance of all of his followers, and he entrusts them into various churches. And what does Jesus expect of the church? When Jesus establishes a church of, let's say, 10, does he hope that when he comes back at the end of time and returns to this church, he's going to find 10 people? Is that what Jesus hopes? Does that make sense to you? He left 10 with all of these teachings and all of this understanding and the power of the Spirit. He's given them everything that he has. Remember, his own nature, which he's imprinted on them in the Spirit. He goes away and he comes back. He expects at least 20. Right? If you've been using your skills and gifts and everything, you should at least be able to multiply. This is what Jesus is talking about as he talks about sort of the master returning and what he hopes to find. He wants to find churches that have been so filled with his own understanding and so energetic with his message that they have multiplied themselves and brought strength to that church and also brought in others who needed to come. And so we go through the parable. And there was the person who received 5. And the master returns and the person says, I've got 5 more. And he says, fantastic. Well done. Good and faithful servant. You have done what you were supposed to do. Enter into the joy of your master. Now, I feel like I should say a word here about evangelism. When we're growing the church, what are we trying to do? Are we trying to get more members? Are we looking for more bips Do you know what bips are? This is something we sometimes use in the church to measure the relative strength of a church. Bips, B-I-Ps. It's sometimes called butts in pews. Okay, pardon me on that one. Are we trying to multiply bips? Is that what we mean by kingdom? We're trying to get more butts in pews? No. Are we trying to get more people who believe a certain concepts and things? Maybe we're getting a little closer. What are we trying to do? What we're trying to do in the church by evangelism is we're trying to save lives. We're trying to bring people to know the God who made them from the beginning, to get them to know their Father. If you want to, in a second, for a moment, imagine the whole world as a world full of orphans. And you want to introduce them back to their Father, to bring them back into their family. When we're trying to multiply the church, we're trying to grow the church, we're trying to help people to be able to rejoice and share in that abundance. The abundance of the Spirit that is known through a relationship with Christ, the peace and the joy and the love that comes from knowing that your Heavenly Father loves you and that you're part of a larger plan. We're trying to bring people into a community where they can know each other and become connected in relationships of love. We're not simply trying to grow a church, we're trying to change the world. Right? We're trying to transform society. We're trying to take people who are lonely and desperate and separate and help them to become part of a spiritual family where they come to know themselves and they come to know their future and they come to be filled with the Spirit. This is what we're looking for. That's why it's called treasure. The master comes to the 5, they got 5 more. The master goes to the 3, they got 3 more. The master goes to the 1, and the 1 has done nothing. Not only that, but the 1 has buried their treasure and then went and dug it back up. Now here's where I want to sort of remind you that we're talking about the end of time, right? The master has returned to the world and he's looking at everyone, and here's a person who's been buried and a treasure that's been buried and brought back. Does that sound a little bit to you like death? Right? If the treasure is the members of the church, this is a story of a person who lived their whole life and multiplied nothing, and then died and went under the ground and was simply waiting for the kingdom. And then when Jesus returned, they rose again, and here they are standing in front of their master, and the master's saying, "What did you do?" And they're saying, "Well, you gave me myself, and I give you myself back." And Jesus says, "But what did you do?" "Well, I had a lot of fun. I enjoyed a lot of things." "Well, I'm glad you enjoyed my kingdom. What did you do to multiply it?" "Well, I didn't do anything." This is what makes the master angry. Because we're not only here for ourselves. We're here to have fun. We're here to enjoy. I mean, look, he's put us in the middle of a garden. What's the purpose of a garden but to enjoy it with your eyes, to enjoy the peace that it gives you, to walk through it and enjoy the order? He's given us a garden, and the purpose of it is to enjoy it and also to multiply what God himself has given us. I want to suggest to you that for too long, lately, the church has been more like contestant number 3 than it has been like contestant number 2 or contestant number 1. And that is because the church is shrinking. That is because Christians, too many Christians, are not multiplying the treasure. They're not sharing the good news. They're not inviting people to come in and become a part of it. They're not identifying lonely people and saying, "Let me bring you to a place where you can," now I want to sing the Cheers thing, where everybody knows your name. And we even have a wine from time to time. Like, too many people are not doing these things, and it's a difficult time, and it's a complex world. But I want to tell you, the church is shrinking. And I think we're in a little bit of a danger of the master returning and saying, "I gave you all of this treasure, what have you done?" And we may not even be able to say, here's what you gave us. The statistical decline of the church. The Episcopal Church peaked at 3.5 million members in about 1960. Today we have 1.5 million members. 3.5 to 1.5. But it's worse than that. Because the United States has been growing. The number of Americans has been multiplying. So we have, and percentage-wise, shrunk much more dramatically. We're not the only church, the only denomination that this is happening for. It's also happening for all the other mainline Protestant denominations. And lest you think that churches with drum sets are the ones that are growing, even churches with drum sets have started to notice a decline. Even some of our local, very large churches have begun to shrink and to condense. When I came to St. James downriver, which was 2004, so I'm in my 20th year, which I'll get to 20 next August, but I'm in my 20th year. When I got here, there were 11 churches, 11 Episcopal churches downriver. And of those 11 Episcopal churches, 8 of them, as far as I recall, had full-time priests. You could look over at St. Thomas Trenton, full-time priest. Grace Southgate, full-time priest. St. Stephen's Wyandotte, full-time priest. Trinity Belleville, full-time priest. Trinity Monroe, full-time priest. Interestingly, this isn't really part of the sermon, but all of them were also men. And there has been a shift in this time where now all of them but one are led by women. And I do think that's a gain. In the sense of women coming into authority in the church, which we need to do until it's fully equal. But today, we are the only full-time church with a full-time priest in all of downriver. One church, and it's us. Every single one, half-time, quarter-time, three-quarter time, half-time, quarter-time, three-quarter time. In that time, we have watched as the number of Episcopalians has begun to shrink to levels that are so low, it's actually hard to even conceive of how they're making it. Statistics that came out from 2022, we just got the statistics, show us that the average Episcopal church on Sunday morning, guess how many members? Guess how many attendants? Guess how many bips? Average in the Episcopal church, like all the Episcopal church, around 35 on Sunday morning. 35. We're at about 120, St. James. In the Episcopal church, the average number of members, everybody on the rolls, if everybody came in a great big huge, the average number is somewhere between 60 and 65. We have between 450 and 550 members at St. James, depending on how you count it. I say all of this because I want to put you into a perspective of where we are as St. James in the Downriver Deanery and in the Episcopal Church. There's something special that's happening here. We are doing well. We have lots of BIPs. We have lots of support. We have tons of programs. We have an extraordinary number of ministries. We've got book groups. We've got Bible studies. And we're constantly trying to multiply those things for 2 reasons. One is because we want to share the treasure. We want people to know what these things are. We want to create a place that's so good that you're not embarrassed to invite your friends. We want a place that's so welcoming that you feel sure that if you have somebody in your circle who risks coming, that someone will come and ask them their name, they will come get to know them, they will share some nice conversation with them, they'll get a good worship service, they'll receive a beautiful and appropriately, respectful liturgy. We're trying to create a place that is such a treasure that the treasure can be multiplied. And there's a second reason as well. And in some ways, this is sort of where everything I've been saying is being pointed. I think we have a special responsibility at this church because everything around us seems to be in some stage of wilting. Now, there are signs of hope. Belleville has a new priest, and he's doing extremely well there. St. Stephen's Wyandotte is showing extraordinary signs of growth, and I think that's wonderful. It's great to see our sister church not only on their feet, but thriving. But we at St. James continue to be the strongest church by multiple measures downriver. And I think we are called to create something here that is so strong, that is so faithful, that is so rich, that it has so many opportunities, that if everything else should start to decline, we would remain as a mission center, as a light on a pedestal, as a city on a hill that can continue to strengthen the church in this region, and when the time comes to help to renew the downriver, and to help to renew this deanery, which is showing so many signs of decline. We have a responsibility to the future, I think. When you think about 50 years from now, if all of these part-time churches continue their decline, there could be 3 or 4 churches downriver. There could be 2 or 3. I want to see St. James as one of those. And not simply one that's struggling, but one that's standing on both feet, one that's shining with all of its windows open, one that's a beacon of hope and strength, and one that's helping to continue to regrow the church in our neighborhoods and in our cities. We're called to be that light. And the way we do it is by helping to multiply this treasure. So that at the end of time, when Jesus calls us back and we stand back in front of him and he says, "What did you do to multiply your church?" You can say, "We did everything we could. We gave everything that we had. And look at what we have done." And he can look us in the eyes and say, "Well done, good and faithful servant. Enter into the joy of your master." The only way we get to that place is by continuing to make this church strong. And the way it's strong is through the efforts and strength of all of our ministries, and also through the offerings that we make to continue to build and grow this place, through its staff, through its programs, through its ministries, through its facility, and through our place in this city. I want to ask you to begin to pray about how God is calling you to strengthen this church. How God is calling you, all of the treasure he's given you, to invest in this place, to keep it strong and to help it to grow. We have so many signs of growth around us. The diocese has offered to give us a grant that is going to help us to bring in a new priest. It's a 2/3 grant. They want to give us 65% of the salary, but they want us to come up with the other 30%. So with the second priest on staff, we could be the first church in 15 years on the island that has more than one clergy person. The first church in more than 15 years on this island that can stand up and say, "We are not shrinking, we are growing. Our programs are not diminishing, they are multiplying. Our services are not reducing, they are expanding. We are a church that is doing our work and carrying out our work and doing the ministry that God has called us to do." The only way it happens is when all of us gather our wagons together and put our efforts into the middle to make it. Please consider how you will help grow the church in the year 2024. It's about more than us. It's about the good things for us. It's about the great things that bring people in. And it's about strengthening a center of ministry so that we can thrive for generations to come. So that when the Master returns, we're not contestant number 3. Amen.